Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Poles and why they suddenly became overpowered in Age of Empires 2. Now I use the word suddenly carefully because the civilization was pretty much unchanged since release, so in theory it should have been overpowered when it first came out. However, Poles are actually a pretty hard civilization to play and they're a hard civilization to master, and so it took a long time for players to really understand how to best abuse the civilization. However, in recent times the code has been cracked and Poles were completely busted and it was now apparent to pretty much everyone. I'm going to go ahead and recap the history of Poles and how they rose to popularity in recent times. But first, I want to quickly shout out my secondary channel on YouTube, Hera Gameplay. If you want to become a good player, the best way to do that is to watch point of view gameplay from high level players. I personally upload a video every single day against the top of the competition. I'm currently ranked 1 on the ladder, so you're going to get the top of the top ladder games on that channel, one video every single day. Link in the description below, guys. Make sure to check out Hera Gameplay on YouTube to enjoy that daily 1v1 point of view gameplay. Alright, back to the video. Let's talk about the Poles. So just to mention about the Poles, they were completely unchanged until the very last patch where they got a small nerf that lowered their 50% gold ratio when they mine stone down to 33%. But even with this change, they are pretty much very similar level to what they were before. However, before at 50%, they were obviously just slightly more broken. Keep in mind that when the Poles first came out, they rarely saw used in tournaments. I'll give you a good example. In King of the Desert, the Arabia tournament of the year, Poles very rarely saw play. And if they did, they weren't first pick or even first 3 picks for the pro players. They were more like last pick, and it was just like, oh, I'll grab Poles because they're available. Pretty much no one banned them, and they were a strong civilization, in fact a very overpowered civilization that no one really cared to dive into or to make use of. That kept going. Poles kept going under the radar for up until RMS 2 Cup. That was the first tournament where people actually gave very high prio to Poles that I'm aware of. It's at least the first S tier tournament that Poles were given very high prio. Before that, there were some players that liked them, some players that didn't really care about them, but in RMS 2 Cup it became very clear that some people were actually first picking Poles or banning Poles pretty much for the first time. The reason why they were discovered in RMS 2 Cup was because there was a certain map that was very boom heavy. Players started very far away, there wasn't a lot of action in the early game, and so players wanted a civilization that thrives in that scenario. And Poles came to mind because, of course, if there's not a lot of action, they can make use of the full work farms very effectively, which is one of the biggest bonuses for Poles. I think RMS 2 Cup was the first tournament. However, I personally believe that the power of Poles was discovered way before RMS 2 Cup, and I think you know who discovered it? It was the arena players and the team game players. Why? Because in both of these scenarios, for team games and for arena, there's a very calm early game for the most part. Players are very far away from each other, and so there's a lot of time to set up your full work farms, and that's really the main strength of Poles and where it comes from. And so I think if you're an arena player, you're going to know exactly how to use the farm bonus and just set up your farms perfectly in your arena base, surrounded by stone walls, completely undisturbed, no downside to it whatsoever, and you're going to notice that your food income is going to be miles ahead of your opponent, pretty much regardless of what civ they have. Even if they have Khmer or Slavs, the two strong farmers to what we've been used to, the Poles will completely destroy them in food collected from farms. Poles are way better than both of the civs, their farms are insane, and it doesn't even come close in the long run when it comes to a pure boom between Poles or any of those civilizations. Not to mention the stone mining bonus for arena is also very accessible because you can easily mine some stone, use your market to get the gold that you need, and then have a little bit of extra stone for forward castle drops or just extra town centers in general. The idea that you can mine stone, get extra gold, and then use the market to get a net amount of resources and make it pretty much like whatever you want, that is actually completely absurd and completely broken. You can mine stone and there's zero repercussions. You're getting more resources, the market helps you balance it all, and it's all perfect. It's simply better than mining gold, and that is a very crazy bonus. However, nowadays, I would say that people, because of how strong the Poles came to be, or how strong they are in the eyes of many people started playing them not only on arena and these closed maps where you can get safe farms. People tried to make them work on open maps, and you know what? They made them work. Even now on open Arabia, Poles are still considered insanely strong, and while they might not be as oppressive on the closed maps as they are on open maps, or sorry, they're more oppressive on closed maps, not as oppressive on open maps, but you're still able to get away with a good amount of farms. If you wall up your base on Arabia, for example, you're going to be pretty safe to mine stone, make use of the farms, and just turbo your way up through the economy. So now we're in a situation that Poles are going to be first pick or ban in pretty much all the top tournaments, regardless of what the map is. As long as there's a pure land map on the field, Poles will be highly contested. And so you might be asking, what really makes them OP? Is it just their economy? Is it the fact that they've got 2 economy bonuses? Well, it's pretty much yes to all the above questions. However, it's even more than that. So The biggest reason why poles are overpowered is the fact that, of course, they have two insanely strong eco bonuses that also mesh together very nicely. I'll give you an example. You're going to start off the game by just making some full work farms. You'll obviously make whatever units you need if it's an open map to get by in the early game, but the point is you're going to use the full work farms to develop your economy. Now, how do you protect the full work farms? Well, you're going to want to probably wall your base, and then if you get pushed in castlage, it's going to be very hard to defend the full work farms. Well, don't worry, we can easily mine some stone and get a castle. Usually, if you get a castle with a generic civilization, you've spent all that time mining stone, and you're going to be pretty far behind because you didn't gather any other resource. But with poles, if you gather 650 stone, you get half of that in gold. So boom, 325 gold in the stockpile. You can use that for monks, knights, whatever the case may be, and it's just really strong to have a little bit of extra resource when also mining a very powerful resource like stone. So now not only do you have amazing farms, but you also have castles in your base to defend those farms. And not only do you have castles in your base, but you also have a little bit of extra gold. I say a lot of extra gold to help spend on various different things so you can still field an army. And so as you can see, poles can have a strong economy, great defense, and good military all at the same time. Not only that, but you have the unique technology in castlage that makes your knights 60% cheaper in terms of gold. So when you have that castle that comes down defensively, you have the gold in the bank that you got because you mined stone. Now you can get a unique tech that gives you 60% cheaper knights when it comes to gold. Now for the record, I don't think this technology is overpowered. I think if you give this technology to any other civ, it's actually a very mediocre technology, assuming they don't have obviously a really strong cavalier or paladin in the late game. So the reason why this technology is strong is because it's given to the poles that want to mine stone for their castle. And that's exactly what the poles will want to do in most games anyways. So they're mining stone anyways, they get a castle, and now they can easily go for that unique tech, which gives them a massive power play in castlage, spamming knights for very cheap cost and very low gold cost. So food is easy for poles to get because of the full works. Gold is a very limited resource, but you get a little bit extra because of the stone, and you have whatever gold you have available. So as you can see, pretty much infinite knight spam can come out right away for the poles in castlage, and it's very hard for a civilization to deal with that if they're not getting half the bonuses or half the savings that the poles are getting. Not to mention, if the game doesn't end in castlage, no problem. Poles have one of the best late games in the game right now. They have amazing eco with their full work farms, getting crop rotation, making their farms generate a ton of resources just when they're placed, and then of course having not just 8 farms around the full work, but we're not gonna have like 80 farms around full works in general, and that's just gonna turbo their economy like crazy in the late game, allowing you to spam all kinds of units. Okay, maybe the post tech tree is very limited, maybe just maybe their late game isn't that great when it comes to units. Wrong again. They've got one of the best Hussars in the game, the Winged Hussar with trample damage. They have fully upgraded Arbalest minus the last armor upgrade, which barely matters if you've got a meat shield. They have heavy CA with full upgrades minus Spartan tactics and last armor. And then they get siege engineers, and they also get options like siege ram in the late game as well. You're seriously not missing anything with the civilization. It has completely all the options, a ton of economy, and as you can see from the early game to the late game, as long as you don't get completely all in and completely destroyed before you get your defenses up in castlage, you're going to be ahead of your opponent with the poles. And that is why poles suddenly became overpowered to everyone's eyes. Now I'll end this video by saying, okay, if they're so overpowered, why weren't they discovered from the start? Why, as soon as poles came out, why didn't the pros get on them and start completely abusing them? The reason for this is because poles were completely different to play than any other civilization. When poles first came out, their unique unit, the Obuch, and the cheaper knights in castlage kind of took the spotlight, and pro players want to try those out. And to be honest, I forgot to mention the Obuch, but it's also a very strong option for poles to go for, so it's definitely worth mentioning. My bad about that. But although those options are strong, Obuch and the cheaper knights in castlage, it's really the poles economy that was the main focus of the civilization. However, pros couldn't get into the habit of setting up full works properly. We simply didn't understand how strong the bonus was, and so it was completely unnatural to start farming around your mill before your town center. So what the poles pro players used to do is, okay, they'll make one mill for the berries, and we're going to start farming around that mill, but then when the space around that mill, that full work runs out, we're going to just farm around their town center because that's only natural to do. However, this was completely incorrect and stopped us from discovering the potential of the poles. What you should do, and what people are doing now, is making a second full work in the middle of nowhere just to be able to put 8 farms around it. It's really that strong. However, before, this was unnatural for us. We didn't want to make a mill in the middle of nowhere, a second mill as we saw it, and we decided, you know what, we'll just farm around the TC. Not only that, but even to this day, it's very hard to defend full work farms in castlage if you don't abuse the stone mining bonus, which people weren't really abusing beforehand as well. And so right away when poles first came out, they were a fun civ to play, but they seemed very difficult to play and just not worth it in a lot of cases. So pros stuck to what they knew best, the Chinese, the Aztecs, the Mayans, and just decided to play with those strong civilizations instead of taking some risks and innovating with polls. This isn't a new concept, guys. Pro players almost rarely innovate. I know that a lot of people like to attribute innovation to pro players. Wow, this guy comes up with new strategies. I can almost guarantee you that 9 times out of 10, when a new strategy emerges, it's because a lower level player or a team game player or an arena player or someone else took the time to innovate, to come up with a strategy, and the pro player, pretty sad to say it, but it's the truth, saw that strategy being done and just simply did it better than that player, and that's why that strategy became popular in pro play in tournaments. It's just usually how it goes. You see a strategy being done poorly, you like the concept, it looks good, you just take that and you perfect it, and the strategy becomes overpowered, if indeed it was a really strong strategy to begin with. So that's my take on the polls, guys. Let me know if I missed out on anything. Let me know if I said something that's completely incorrect. Let me know if you disagree with me in this video in the comments below, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.